Awesome, my dudes. So welcome back. This is BitsBeTrippin at Miners Disrupt 2023. And I'm sitting here, people I've been wanting to sit down with for a while here. DMG. We were up there almost 2 years ago now. It's been, I think December of 21 into 22, we came with our build. So it's been a little bit. I know you guys had some stuff going when we were there on expansion. When we went there, we walked through and saw, your next, the phase that you were working through. Like to kind of go through and see, you guys got through that expansion. Let's talk through. You guys.
Let me just introduce myself.
Yeah, for sure.
My colleague, Steve Eliscu, COO of DMG Blockchain.
Yes.
With me is joining Phil Power, who runs our operations in Christina Lake in beautiful British Columbia. We have made a tremendous amount of progress. We have built out essentially our mine building, which is has capacity up to 36 megawatts. We're also in the process of building out our yard. What we've said publicly is that we have purchased 40 megawatts worth of containers. That's great. We hope that those are fully installed by the end of the year. Gating us, of course, the longest lead time items typically are the medium voltage transformers. Oh yeah. And so those are going to take a little while to get to our facility, but pretty confident we should have a good portion of that by the end of the year. Phil, why don't you tell us about some of the things that have gone on since the last time? Yeah, for
sure. I'm super excited. I jumped right into it, my dudes. I didn't even introduce them. I was like, where's this stuff? Where's this stuff? But yeah. Come on, Phil.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, since you were there, you saw kind of what was going on in the building that we were retrofitting, converting to the mine and whatnot. You were probably halfway through, maybe a little more than halfway through on that. We did complete that 3-phase project. Awesome. That was completed on time, like on schedule, which was great. Yeah, we finished that off. That's all been filled out for the most part with mining machines, fully operational. Awesome. And then like we were just speaking to the piece that we're kind of moving into now in regards to the expansion. Is the backyard actually, where we are going to start doing some containerizing type mining. So I think did we get your container back? Did it come back?
Yes. So right. Real quick, when we were building our setup, we were trying to expand to up to 6 to 8 containers. And as we were working through with our power company, we all know this, when you set off with a plan and you have, here's our potential megawatts, and then what the reality of what you kind of have to snap back to, it ended up being to where we were locked at 5 for our particular areas. But we had bought 5 containers, and it would put us over the 5 megawatts. So each container is about 1.3 megawatt, and we had 5 containers. So we were like doing the math. We're like, wait a minute here, we're going to be 1 over. So lo and behold, you guys were on the hunt for looking for some containers, and we had bought one in British Columbia, and it was local and it was close for you guys to be able to pick up one. So I can't wait till when it's deployed. I want to come visit it.
Definitely.
It was supposed to be our baby, but yeah, you guys, I know, take care of it. It's great with the expansion. I know with all of us all have to deal with like lead times and stuff. It's supply chain. It is what it is. We all work within, the boundaries of that. So yeah. So on that yard expansion that you guys are going to be doing, I'm assuming you're going to be doing phases of that too, right? You're going to try to deploy all of them at the same time with that infrastructure.
We haven't really developed a phase plan on it yet. In my mind, I'm like, okay, we're obviously not going to bite this all off at one time. Yep. So we have the 40-foot containers, like this one you're talking about. We have 6 of those that are kind of the first step into it. Yep. And then beyond that, we have kind of another bigger aspect that's going to come into play that we've already been working on. And I mean, we can speak a little more on that too, but yeah, that backyard is going to get built out. That's going to bring us another 40 megawatts that Steve mentioned. So
capacity,
that's the plan moving forward. So we've started on that. Yep. Into the fall of this year, hopefully we'll have some stuff operational. That's kind of that would be great if we got to that point.
That's awesome. Well, maybe another winter trip up there to check out the progress with you guys. I love that. I know last time I talked to Sheldon about it, it was like, you should come out here in the summer. It's actually really beautiful. I'm like, I don't know, man. The winters up there are like picturesque. I mean, some of those photos out there we had out there at that location were unbelievable. Like it looked like a winter wonderland, and it was amazing. And you guys got a really beautiful site up there. But yeah, I can't wait to see that expansion. And it like a lot of lessons learned. When we were up there and covering this, there was a lot. I think we got a lot of good exposure from that video from people just to understand on like a larger operations, and then like how you guys were answering the call on heating, how you guys are answering the call on like ventilation and air, and just how you were looking at doing that expansion, and that you built for the future. You had that larger transformer in place from your high tension side. You guys are obviously ready to move for this next expansion on some of those things that are actually longer lead times for like us trying to even get like we were trying to go for 40 megawatt, and it was like trying to find like the larger transformer and the high voltage side of it. It was a much harder acquisition side to try to get to that. So, I mean, you guys were already well ahead on that part of it. So yeah, seeing that expansion, I think would be pretty sweet.
And yes, we are going to phase it.
Yep.
We're not going to do it all at once, but I think there's going to be plenty of work that it'll just look like we're just rolling it all.
Yeah. I mean,
over a period of time.
Yeah.
But wait, there is more.
Yeah.
And, we built out all the infrastructure in the building. We are going to put some additional there's spaces for additional air-cooled miners.
Yep.
But as we open up the yard, we will be moving miners into the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've also talked about is our move to immersion. So we've talked about initial tranche of 12 megawatts.
Mm-hmm.
We've ordered long lead time items related to that.
You got to do it.
And we're really excited about immersion as being the essentially table stakes post halvening.
Yep.
What miners will have at least need to have immersion. Yep. And so we're starting that first tranche right now. And we're doing the engineering. In terms of next generation miners, we've indicated that MicroBT, they have leading edge equipment. Yep. They would certainly be, if we have to buy equipment right now, that would be likely that they would be it. But what we've also said is we're potentially going to have some mix of new equipment and legacy equipment as well. And especially
it's hard to look at some of those hash prices right now.
As some of the new equipment is expensive, and long lead time items that will likely be utilizing some of our existing legacy equipment.
Yeah. There's it's kind of like it's a calculus, and there's some definitely algebra in there too to figure out like when, because you don't want to set on it too long. Those are capital expenditures, and when can they start generating a return? When can you use that capital? And is this market going to come back down a little more, and hash price is going to change? So there is some calculus on trying to figure out when you want to do that, and then looking at those. And it's a competitive landscape right now. You got a couple of new emerging units coming out here. There's a few here. They're not time tested, so we don't know if they'll work real long, right? But doing even sample testing with some of these other units here, and it might change the field a little, right? Especially like in the immersion side, where you can actually get your benefit of overclocking, stable clocks, and get that ROI maybe a little faster, because you can get up to those 215s to 250 terahash ranges on some of these units.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And the thing that I think there's a lack of understanding as to why immersion makes sense. It's not just because the equipment can run more efficiently or just that overclocking, but it's the useful life of the equipment. So early in the life, yes, you can overclock the immersion ready equipment 20 to 30% comfortably, and not even and be within warranty, which is an important aspect of the immersion ready equipment. But over time, reduce the clock rate, is all supported by the firmware. The manufacturers are supporting this, and even get to the point where 3-4 years out, looking at the next happening, you might significantly underclock it and really get 3, 4, 5 years of really good useful life out of the equipment. where with current air-cooled equipment, maybe you get 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
Real useful life where it's generating lots of revenue.
And before you know it, I mean, like a lot of those air cooled units, you indirectly start replacing all the parts. So it's not that if, it's when you're replacing all those hash boards or having to pull them. And like what we do with a lot of our stuff is just hot swap, because I don't want the downtime. So I've overbought on the miners and I'm just swapping a hot swap of something that's hot and good and keeping my load factor up. But now I have a machine that now I have to do all this work to. And if, by asset, we've had a few ourselves where it's just like, I've actually replaced I've touched every component. So what defines it as new, from a life cycle standpoint. So having that longer lead time and looking at like the life cycle of those immersion pieces of equipment, they almost become like the new workhorse, like the S9s that just don't go away because they're consistent. They have a much longer, viability. And the fact that you do have that ability to vary, their hash rate, it does give you a little more, depth of field. We are at the tip of the spear right now on the tech stack too, right? Like it is a little different from the S9s to the S17s through the S19s to, the M50s, the M56 pluses, all those, is because we're at that edge of like the 5 nanometer and the Samsung's new stuff that's going to be coming out with 3 nanometer. We're already at the tip of the spear now. So like innovation on, chips are going to have to make a revolutionary jump and change to get into 300 to 400 terahash type of units. I mean, those are even possible in the current tech stack. So if you have a 215 terahash immersed cooled machine, that is probably going to be the lead for a while, right? I think because we're at that edge of the tip of the spear. So,
and that's the whole thing is, with immersion also, we're expecting incremental improvements. So we expect the fleet not to necessarily be a large homogeneous set of S19s or XPs, but to be and maybe spanning multiple vendors.
Yes.
Where you're getting little incremental improvements and you're constantly with putting new tanks in the service and getting a new fleet that may be 19 joules a terahash instead of 21 or 22. And the next
bringing
one is
your average down.
Yeah, but to do it incrementally, much different way of building out capacity. The other thing is by making these utilizing immersion, I think, as you've indicated, the current generation fleet requires a lot of hand-holding, and we want Phil to be like the Maytag repairman, just be totally bored. We want his life to be boring. So maybe you can talk about kind of what it takes to keep a fleet of S19J Pros up to date.
I think it's no news that what it takes. I think that's something that probably most miners do understand at this point, but it's a lot of work. The management is a lot too, for sure.
It is. And we try to show some of that, on the channel of just like what the care and feeding is and required, and what we've done ourselves to try to help the community and really bring understanding. I mean, we had some folks from one of the capital companies come by and was like thanking us because they were the money side of, one of the other miners out there. And he's like, you know what? They've been telling us for a while how hard this is. And, and it's hard for us to hear that because we're like, oh, they're just telling us excuses. But then we see what you guys are producing out here on the video. And then we're seeing, as your guys have went through and try to change and adjust, struggle just with our 5 megawatts. And they're like, thanks for doing that. Cause it actually did a service for us and our folks that haven't understand. Cause now we can hear them. We can hear that they needed some more support to help get the maintenance piece done. And the way we approached it was essentially what they were doing with having additional miners in place. And that way we could keep the load factor up. I'm like, you have pro formas. You're expected to base on a rate of return based on what hash rate you have there. If I have machines down, I'm underperforming that. So my most important thing is what my load factor is and how much power I have, that I'm fully up as much as possible all the time.
You want to have your runtime as high as you can, right?
Let me move a new miner in that place, and I'm working on your other one. And now I'm going to have a hot swappable thing to where I can keep my load factor always up to its peak. And what they'll find is that over time, and especially if these mining companies start to really work to where we could start using hash boards and other machines where it's not so, pixel locked to those different machines, that now I can start looking at a machine like, okay, that's 3 boards and a control board and a power supply that I can now maybe fix 4 miners with, and I can quickly hot swap, because that's what we really need. We need the ability to quickly keep the hash rate up. And yes, I'm going to have a back office shop that's going to work on machines, fix all the little things that are happening. But the most important thing on this space is to make sure that we're always up as much as possible, right? And then the firmware's getting a little more openness to where we can make fine adjustment changes, because there are periods of time where we have immeasurable amounts of heat. Like in our area right now, it's 100 degrees over the next 3 days Fahrenheit, record heat. And we got to adjust for it. Everything's in low power mode, right? And then that has an impact. So understanding on how to react to that, and then getting the industry to help us unlock some of those things to make all of us have a better work experience on it, I think is vital. So we try to do that and try to show, the realities of that, because it is what a lot of us have to deal with, with maintenance.
I think the firmware is a big one too, having that as a protective measure.
Yep.
Or, where it does its job to protect the machines, to reduce maintenance.
Yep.
As well, right? And then obviously there's the environmental aspect too, just wherever you have your machines, your miners, and then doing whatever you need to do there to try to keep that environment so that it's going to be a good environment for your miners, which is going to reduce your maintenance as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Less heat exposure, let's say, for example.
Yeah.
If there's a way around that, it's great, right? Reduce your maintenance program as much as you can. We all would love to do that, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. And it's just a little more finite control with it. And just, I get where the technology evolution and the maturity model, as it were, came from, and the why they're locked down in the particular ways they are. But I think now that we're getting this industry into such a much more industrialized, I mean, if you look at some of these immersion cooling solutions as an example, I mean, that like telemachine, it was IntelliCore. It's the machine that's outside.
Yeah, IntelliFlex.
IntelliFlex machine that's out there. I mean, that's almost like a mil spec standards thing. I mean, that thing is like on another level. Now there's a cost to that, and we can all talk about that. But like, as we start to see the industry get into that kind of data center, deployment side with lots of telemetry, lots of controlled, finite control, and then section and off thing, you're seeing a new maturity model come into play, from the tech stack that we're seeing around here, that us as, mining companies can look and kind of see what makes sense for the business model to start to incorporate, right? For the investors and folks that are part of this, that just are, giving us the lifeblood to build out rigor, right? As we were starting to learn from that. So I think the maturity in the space just in the last 2 years that I've seen has really came up a notch from the industry in general. So I think hopefully in this next few years we'll get those unlocks on those firmwares, and the mining companies will start to realize like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's figure out a better way to optimize this.
One of the things also working, I definitely agree that's a trend in terms of open firmware, but cost, capital cost as an issue is not going to go away.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be expensive still.
Still, if you're using state-of-the-art silicon in terms of your overall income statement, that your depreciation is still going to be a very significant component. One of the things from a financial point of view, we like immersion cooled miners is if they do extend the useful life, we can depreciate them over a longer period of time. Because we use right now with air cooled miners, DMG does fairly aggressively depreciate equipment. Going back on the infrastructure side, one of the things is, you mentioned IntelliFlex and kind of the mil spec. What we would say is this is a very competitive industry.
Absolutely.
And if you look at one of their competitors, Foghash was showing equipment 2.6 megawatt configuration for $100,000 a megawatt.
Oh, wow.
That's excluding the immersion fluid, but the immersion fluid might get it up to, call it 125K per megawatt. Those are the kind of numbers if
you're not order of magnitude
below
for
that.
People that don't know the cost of the Intel. I think it's around 500 and something thousand a megawatt, right? So you're talking almost, a lot. I mean, that's more than 2.5 times the cost, and that for what, from a performance standpoint, if they're going to perform really around that same, I mean, you're obviously going to want to probably more go towards that structure there. And it comes down to what are you trying to deploy and where, and what's the history of their deployments versus the others, but trying to justify that large of a cost difference,
Yeah. So, and DMG has done a lot of its own infrastructure development internally. Our PDUs are self-made.
Yep.
We've gone through numbers of many iterations of that. You'd think it's just a power channel. There's nothing to it, but we've gone through numerous iterations of that. One of the things we did early was make sure that we spec the amperage for our sockets to be higher than what was the industry standard. And when miners ran 1,000 to 1,500 watts, you'd say, well, why do you need to do that? But now that miners run 3,000 to 3,500 watts, we're really glad we did that.
It worked out. Yeah. And if you look, I mean, some of the numbers that we're even talking on the immersion, if we're really overclocking too, because it's great that it goes to 215 or 225, but you're also paying the power. The power is going to 4,700, 5,200 watts, right? You don't get, there's a huge diminishing return on, like, it's pretty linear. Like, you bring that terahash rate, and then it actually starts to go more inefficient.
Yeah, it's more inefficient. So a miner that might run 22 joules a terahash at 5.5 kilowatts would be, call it 24 at 7.
Yep.
And those are the kind of numbers in terms of what are going to be the types of miners that at least we're planning for in terms of how we're building out our infrastructure. So the idea of 7 kilowatt miners would have been insane a couple of years ago. It's going to be pretty normal going forward.
Correct. Yeah. And it all comes back down to that algebra problem, right? You're figuring out what, Bitcoin's, price is and what it makes sense. And, it's something that's floats, like people are like, well, what are you at? And I'm like, what day is it? What's the price? Right. So, cause it is that, right. If Bitcoin tomorrow jumped to 50,000, it's going to change the economics on where you're going to want to, maybe, especially if you're in an immersion, like you're like, I am going to take that to 24 joules per terahash because it makes absolute financial sense to do that. And having the eye on that level, it helps. That's the differentiator, right? To be able to have to capture.
Oh, the halving is another one.
Yeah, the halving.
We need to be prepared for that as well, and then kind of, make sure. I mean, thinking from an efficiency perspective, and the halving coming and remaining profitable.
Yes,
you definitely want to be prepared and start preparing for that. And who knows? Maybe the price will go up. Maybe it won't.
Yeah.
But being prepared
right
for
now,
that is
the
important.
price doubles to now. The halving, it is a halving. So even if the price was double where it's at now, we are at the same profit margins right now, like is now when that happens. So, and it's going to be a little higher than that because right now it's been ticking up, right? So if we look at the month over month from this year alone, if it's another 14 to 18% larger network than it is right now, plus the halving, it needs to be 72,000, right, to stay current to now, right? So that we have a little pro forma that washes that, and it's essentially it's just set up like current, forecast and LE. What's my latest estimate, right? And that latest estimate's tracking, where we're, based on current growth over month over the last year. And that gives you kind of a leading indicator, like, price really needs to be around here if I'm going to keep the same where I'm at now. And then you can start to dial up, like, it looks like, okay, if I'm at low power mode running the most efficient possible, then that's my worst case scenario. So then, you start doing that algebra to figure out, and you have to do that due diligence, especially in a larger company that's public, especially too, because you're trying to bring the best value to your investors, and you're watching it.
And I think, as Phil well said, that we're hoping Bitcoin pricing takes off, especially post-halving, but we're not counting on it. And we're certainly, in terms of how we're thinking about deploying our infrastructure post-halving without a big lift in Bitcoin pricing, we're very much spending a lot of time and effort think, how can we best optimize in that environment?
Yep. Yeah, because it does, start to take the wind out of a lot of sails if it doesn't move, right? It's really gonna pause a lot of people, if they're not structured right and have the ability to adjust flight on what they have deployed. So yeah, I think doing those scenarios and how to handle it is, it's just proper due diligence, right?
Yeah, totally.
Make sure it's being done, and that's the differentiator. That's what you guys are doing, man. Yeah, when we were up there, I was extremely impressed with the way you guys were running that, and just how even thinking of that far ahead, right? You're looking out for that, and that it gave us inspiration too, just to like, man, we really need to think about that. People need to think about that, right? And it's you guys are already a step ahead on that. So yeah, I think this is great. I can't wait to get up there to see some of the expansion stuff.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic
it's been good.
trip.
I mean, Sheldon's a visionary on that.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at what he actually sort of thought through, you were talking about the transformer that we originally put in there.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Really
wasn't
planning for the future.
thinking a year ahead on that.
Yeah.
He definitely had some vision going on there for longer term, and even with the immersion stuff, I think that vision has been alive for quite a while. And and to see that it's now, it's not there yet, but we're making those steps now, right? Where they are real steps towards immersion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's cool to see it all kind of happening now. The vision is unfolding, and it's just all happening.
Yeah,
but it's been a long time vision, right?
Yeah, it's hard work, but it's good to be part of it.
Just to give a little more background, Sheldon Bennett, our CEO, couldn't be here today, but he is the visionary. We both worked together at in 2015 time frame together at BitFury. So people kind of use this term OG, and I'm like flattered to hear that, but at the same time, we have a lot of experience. Sheldon architected this idea of not just we're a Bitcoin mining company, but we have software that's focused on enabling infrastructure and really this whole idea that we want to monetize Bitcoin transactions. And certainly as we talk about the halving, how to monetize the transactional piece of Bitcoin is clearly going to come more to the forefront. So that vision hopefully comes into play as our software strategy really plays out over the next
stuff like ordinals and stuff like that, really bringing different innovation to the space. And I think a lot of that stuff, as people start to build out new potential solutions, this is the great thing about this ecosystem. It's easy to get myopic on the mining because we love mining and that's what we're part of, but there is an entire other ecosystem. This place really gets to show, like this conference in general, you get to see, the art, you get to see the NFTs, the ordinals, the things that other people take and are trying to build on top of it, which brings more value proposition to Bitcoin. Because yes, the halving is very tied to the price, but if you have a transactional value that starts to run up the use to the point of where it's not 6.25, it's 7.9, and then that halves down, and now we're at like close to 6 anyways after a halving, because there is a lot of activity on that chain. It starts changing the calculus, right? So we might be all planning at 3.125 Bitcoin per block, but if that, ordinals and things like that really start taking up, and it ends up only the average block's 5 because you have that much transaction volume, really changes things, right? It does.
And help. For sure that the advent of ordinals this year people have talked about, it makes Bitcoin fun again. But I think it's well beyond that in terms of
start
really being able to add utility. To date, the killer app for Bitcoin has been trading Bitcoin. That's how you make money, and obviously mining as well, but just sort of in terms of the coin itself from a utility point of view has been very limited. Ordinals to us really opens the floodgates for a lot more possibility that back in the days of colored coins, and we really talked about attaching assets to Bitcoin. Now we have 2 quadrillion Satoshis that give a whole new potential in terms of how the Bitcoin network is used. It's not just about the coin, it's about the value of the network, and people really thinking much more than has been done to date.
Absolutely.
And for us, the cycles are going to come and go, but it's this secular trend to having more utility of Bitcoin that's ultimately going to drive the value. And as you say, that's going to result in, which was Satoshi's original vision, is a much more substantial part of the block reward coming from the transaction fee portion.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I think you contextualize kind of where it could go with that. I'm a believer, and I think that it inspires more people to build more things on it. It's what needs to happen to create a much larger ecosystem to leverage this payment rail system that is Bitcoin, and just, yes, limited asset. There's only going to be 21 million, but it's much more. It can be much more than that, and yeah, I don't know how we topped that one, man. That was good. It just went great. I love it, man. It was good stuff. But no, I want to make sure we can. Looks like they're starting to shut down here. This was great, guys. I love the update. I can't wait to get back up there. I think this was a good update for everybody else that has seen that video. It was asking kind of like, hey, how was the progress and stuff made? And we can throw some B-roll up there and show some people from the previous thing, and then we'll get some new ones when we come up there. But
sounds good. You guys we're looking forward to seeing you up there.
And it was good to have you on.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, my dudes.